Hi, everybody. Coach Stacy, Lynn here. I want to welcome you to this week's edition of my book club with Not So Sorry. Okay, I don't know really if this is a book club or not, but as you know, a couple weeks ago, I decided that I was going to start reviewing some books that I've read so that I can actually read them, because I don't know about you, but I buy a lot of books and I never read them. So that's why I am reading this book here by Kara Oakes or Kaya Oakes. Still not sure if that's how you say her name.
It sounds like you're reading a book by Kaya Oakes, a nonfiction writer and journalist who teaches writing at UC Berkeley. She has written several books, including Not So Sorry and The Defiant Middle.
Apparently, my phone wanted to say something. Did not know it was going to do that. By the way, I got a brand new phone. There you go. Which, by the way, I have to tell you guys something, and then I'll get into this week's chapter on forgiveness. If you're new to the channel, my name is Stacy Lynn Harp. I am a certified master Christian advice, certified Christian master Christian life coach. I guess that's what my title is. What is it? It is certified master Christian life coach. There you go. Anyway, and the purpose of this channel is to encourage you, to give you some tools to make you think a little different. I work with trauma and abuse, spiritual abuse in particular, relationship issues, etc. Blah blah blah. Anyway, here's the thing. I want to share something with you. I think this is really interesting that my phone decided to go off as I'm recording this. First of all, I just got a brand new flip phone. Okay, it's the flip. You can see it, Samsung flip. And I got this phone because it's been about 7 years or so since I've got a new phone. This is my old phone. And this one is not no longer hooked up to a phone number. But I've been with T-Mobile for like 21 years, which is a very long time to give loyalty to one company, right? And so they offered me a really good deal on this. And of course, I needed to get a new phone because my other phone, it stopped working pretty much because of 5G and some other stuff. Anyway, I just got off the phone with them a little while ago, and they wanted to upgrade me to a smartwatch, a Samsung smartwatch. And at first, I was tempted because, you know, I mean, who wouldn't be tempted, right? To get a cool smartwatch and all this other stuff. But the more that I talked to this lady, the more irritated I felt because it wasn't like, oh, I'm giving you this deal. Oh, let me put me on hold and deal with your supervisor and my supervisor, and we're going to get you the best deal and blah, blah. By the end of the call, she had decided to put me on hold. So I hung up. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to play this stupid game with you. And, she was all ready to give me a new Samsung smartwatch for free, for free, for only $15 for the cellular service part of it. Oh, and an extra added bonus of go ahead and now you need the protection plan for your watch for at least 3 months, and that's only going to be another 15 or 30 bucks, whatever it was. And that's what irritated me because I was like, look, I've been a customer of T-Mobile for 21 years. I understand having a good deal. I know they run these promos and all of that. But I also did my research. And the more I listened to her, the more I knew that she really wasn't looking out for my best interest. Um, and so she called me back after I hung up on her. And I answered the phone and she's like, okay, so this is the deal that we have for you. And I'm like, I'm not interested. And I could tell there was a little bit of disappointment in her voice. And I felt a little disappointed too, because I was like, you know what? This would have been a great deal if you had kept to this instead of trying to pressure me and add to this, this, and this, because I know that you can get the same watch for under $200 and you don't need the cellular stuff that they're trying to sell you. And you don't need a protection plan either. But that was kind of where I was telling my husband right before I got on here that, you know what, if they had just done the right thing and didn't try to bully me into getting something I really didn't want to pay for, um, I probably would be getting a new watch. But here's the thing, I can still get a new watch, just not through T-Mobile, right? Um, but this is what I was telling my husband. What I was telling my husband was I can understand why older people in particular, and not just older people, but I was talking to him about older people, get scammed or bullied into doing something that they really don't want to do, because she also told me when I first talked with her a couple months ago, or a couple weeks ago, not months ago, couple weeks ago, she's like, "Oh, I'm going to reduce your plan. You're going to get another phone line. You're going to do this, do that, blah blah. It's going to be $10 a month less." Now today it was, "Oh, you're going to have this," and I'm like, "Wait a minute. You said that I was going to have this," and she goes, "Oh yeah, and then you need your protection plan for your phone number here that I have on my old phone," and I was like, I logged into T-Mobile ahead of time to look at what they offered, so I knew I was prepared. But then she said that, and I was like, you know what? I don't need I don't need a protection plan for this phone. I don't need a protection plan for this phone because this phone doesn't have a phone number on it anymore. This phone has two phone numbers on it. By the way, they can do that now, just so you know. It's a new thing I didn't know. And so I just say that to kind of give you a word of caution if you're going to try to deal with T-Mobile or anybody for that matter, AT&T or whoever, and they're trying to sell you a great deal, before you say yes and bite, think about what they're saying, do your own research, and don't feel pressured by them, and have some boundaries. Say no. Say no. And that's the thing. When I hung up on her, I was like, you know what? I know she isn't talking to her supervisor. And I knew this because every time I talked to her, and this was like the third time I've talked to her, every time I talked to her, she always said, "Oh, my supervisor said this. Oh, my supervisor said that." And I don't know if that is a sales gimmick or whatever. It kind of feels that way. But just be careful with how these people do that. And I've been in sales, so I know how sales works. I hate it, which is why I don't do sales. I don't do sales that way. But I was successful in sales when I sold stuff because I'm honest and I'm not trying to, push. So that was, as my husband would say, that's all for free, people. Now let's get into the book because I'm not going to talk long about this book today. I have to tell you, to be honest, that this book is really boring to me at this point. Um, there's a part of me that doesn't really want to finish reading it, to be honest. Um, but I'm committed to because I think it's important. Julie Roy's made this her offering of the month, or her premium offer, I guess. And I thought, well, Julie's recommending this book, so maybe there's something good in it. So this month or this week, we're going to look at chapter 3 of this book. And I'm going to go back here to the chapter title. It's called Forgiveness American Style. I actually found this chapter boring, just like I did most of the second chapter. I can tell you in this particular chapter, I'm trying not to cover the mic, that there really isn't any scripture in here. She's not really taking apart anything theological, and kind of digging into the scripture, which we kind of know why now, because last time she actually mentioned why. Um, and but I will tell you what the summary is basically of this chapter. So she opens this chapter talking about the musical Hamilton, which I guess a whole lot of people have seen. I haven't, I don't care. I haven't seen The Lion King either, but that's beside the point. I never saw Titanic either, but anyway. So she talks about Hamilton the musical. She says here, Hamilton also reflects a theological tendency throughout American history that believes wrongs are easily erased and the wrongdoer only needs to feel bad for a brief moment of time. Um, and then she says this, I'm going to quote, this is page 47. She says, just like that, when their son has died, she's referring to Hamilton's son, because of his father's terrible advice about dueling, and her husband has publicly and privately humiliated her on multiple occasions. Eliza Hamilton, who seems by all accounts to have been nobody's fool, suddenly loses all of her deserved rage at her husband and turns into the perfect picture of Christian forgiveness, spending the rest of her life devoted to restoring the public image of her husband after his own death in a duel. Yes, the real Eliza was a deeply religious person, but this sentimentalized notion that forgiveness is just that easy and accompanied by a soaring chorus of praise had me squirming rather, in my seat and muttering bullshit. That's what she wrote. I'm just saying, this progressive Catholic used bullshit in her book. And then she says, we don't really know how she felt. We don't really know how Eliza felt. And that's true. It's an interesting thing. One of the things, my dog's finally settling down. One of the things I will say as I was reading that I was thinking of Hillary and Bill Clinton. Because I was thinking about the fact that Hillary has apparently forgiven Bill. Who knows? But we all know Bill was a philanderer, um, just like Hamilton, apparently. So, but we also know that Hillary isn't to be messed with either. So anyway, then she says here, her story is a reminder that the narrative of forgiveness is often told by the person who has been forgiven and not by the person granting forgiveness. And I think that that is a worthy point, right? Because I know when I forgave my mother and my great uncle for what they did, that's my story to tell. But neither one of them have ever shared how that impacted them. So it's interesting. And then she also says here, everyone who does wrong wants to be forgiven, and this is why we are captivated by narratives of forgiveness. I would disagree with that point. Actually, I don't know that everybody who does wrong wants to be forgiven. I think if that was the case, we would see more of that, but I don't think that's true. She does, but I don't. And then she says, but forgiveness isn't linear. It isn't necessarily something that happens in a moment. Sometimes it could take decades or hundreds, if not thousands of years. Okay, good. He's getting in his bed finally. Um, and this is really a good point because really the rest of this chapter, she's actually talking a little bit about the Catholic Church, how there was some abuse there, but of course there's abuse in the Protestant church. She brings up the Reformation. She talks about Calvin and his point of view on salvation. Um, she tells a funny story of going to the Rome, where she says here, therefore I accidentally earned a plenary indulgence, which technically wiped away every sin I'd ever committed. And then she said, let's be honest, an exhaustively long list. And this meant that if I had immediately dropped dead from the Roman heat wave, I would have gone straight to heaven. And then she said, unfortunately, I got gelato instead. And given the fact that gluttony is a sin and I got 3 scoops like almost everyone else who gets an indulgence, I just went straight back to sinning. So the author has a little bit of a sense of humor. That was kind of funny, actually. All right. Let's see, what else can I share with you here? So I think the reason why she titled this chapter the way that she titled it was because she was trying to make the argument that when the Puritans came to America, they had basically left an oppressive religious system and then they reestablished a new religion here in America. And she picks up here and she says, and in reinventing God, they also reinvented forgiveness. So, and there is a really interesting history there. I remember when I was younger, which seems so long ago. Go lay down, mister. Go lay down, Bubba. I remember when I was younger, growing up, that, people would say, well, what religion are you? Are you Catholic or are you Protestant? And I was born into a Catholic family. But when I became a Christian, I flipped over to being Protestant. But I didn't understand what the, I didn't understand, sorry about that. I guess if John Elving can do this and talk or whatever, then I can do that too. But I didn't understand what the difference was. I didn't understand why there was such a big argument between the Protestants and the Catholics at that time. I mean, I was in high school. I didn't know. I had no idea. But now I do. Now I understand. And so she brings out, basically the history of the indulgences in the Catholic Church, and then how the Reformation took place and changed some stuff. And she makes this point throughout the chapter, and I'm not going to go too much longer in this, but I'm going to read this paragraph. She goes, this is page 56. I can only imagine, see him right there. I can only imagine this is what having children running under your feet trying to do a video is like. Is what it is. Anyway, on page 56, she writes, it's overly simplistic to say that Protestants think forgiveness comes from God alone and Catholics think it requires God, good works, and sacramental forgiveness from a priest. But the truth is that Protestant emphasis on forgiveness without the mediation of clergy has meant that Americans see forgiveness as a more individualistic process than the idea in the Hebrew Bible that it is meant to bring a person back into a community. And I had to laugh when I read that, because I did. I literally laughed when I read that. And so then she brings up Joseph Smith, who is the founder of the Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. She talks a little bit about that. Okay. And then on page 58, she says, as evangelical churches grew in the 20th century, so too did the idea that a personal relationship with Jesus was more important than a sense of responsibility to the community. And really, this is really one of the big issues that she's bringing up in this chapter, is that there is in the world of forgiveness, we have seen the shift from an institution giving forgiveness, aka the Catholic Church, in you want to come here? Come here. In exchange for indulgences and things. Or, to the person who's having a personal relationship, because Calvin and Luther and the others, they realized that that relationship with God and salvation comes through Christ alone. You don't need to work for it. And so because of that, there's these theological differences. What's interesting to think about, and if you're still with me, thank you for being with me. What's interesting to think about is how these institutions really have shaped how people see forgiveness, the Catholic Church, right? And then she goes on, she talks about how the Pope came out basically on behalf of the Catholic Church and asked for forgiveness for all the people who molested, the priests and stuff who molested everybody in the church. And then she gets into more of American history. She talks a little bit about Frederick Douglass, and how it's believed that he forgave his master. And yet at the same time, that really wasn't, quote, true. And there was really no reason that he had to, because there was nothing worthy of that. There was no reparation for it, and all that. So it's a really interesting, chapter, and I will say that, let's see here, I can't see anymore. Yeah, I'll close it. I'll close this chapter. On page 63, she ends this page by saying, for many Americans, forgiveness is viewed as primarily individual, like I just said, a sort of self-reinvention that does not need to include communal repair, which makes America unable to deal with its true historical sins in an individualistic society founded by people who considered religion a path to personal rather than collective salvation. A person being forgiven means in some way that they have triumphed over their own sinfulness. But this does not negate collective historical pain or change the toxic patterns of glossing over historical trauma that have scarred American history. And until that pain has ended and given racism's trenchant grip on the American imagination, it's hard to say when or if that will happen. No Black American or any of their descendants owe those men forgiveness. That doesn't make for a great Broadway song and a dance number, but it is at the very least honest, and that's how she ends this chapter. So, and it's interesting, right? Because she also brings up what happened with George Floyd, and then how after all that took place about 5 years ago now, that all of a sudden all these white people were apologizing to Black people, and yeah, it hasn't really done anything as a collective thing. So I guess my question in kind of mulling over this chapter would be for you to consider consider this. That's like the name of my blog. Consider this. Consider um, do you look at forgiveness as an individual thing or more a communal thing? That's interesting to think about because Jesus died for the whole world, but we have to actually accept him individually, right? So there's that, which she doesn't actually talk about that in the chapter. Um, do you think that people in history have to apologize for previous people in history? That's an interesting topic, especially in light of what's happening in the church today. And you know what? I think I will go just a little bit longer and talk about Michael Tait. I'll just put that in the subject. So Michael Tait it's now been revealed yesterday, July 29th, um, that he has assaulted other men. And he's also made um, I mean, he's gotten away with it, right? And he made one public apology, but now all these guys are coming out and they're saying, look, this guy has abused me. But the question is, in light of this chapter, how should we as people respond? Do we individually forgive Michael Tait? Do those he raped and victimized, do they individually forgive him? Or as a collective, does the church as a whole forgive him? I think it was Rita Springer over on Twitter was basically making an argument um, that, and if you don't know who she is, she's actually a singer, or at least she was, I think. And now she's a podcaster. She's very vocal about stuff. But she's basically making the argument that the Christian music industry is in a church. So it's a business. It's a business to sell stuff. And so where is that line in where is the line? Where does the church take accountability for somebody they propped up as a Christian leader, a Christian singer? Where is the line, and where does the victim get any justice, right? Um, and I can tell you, I have seen in my own personal life a perpetrator repent, come to the Lord, do everything that he could to make things right with his daughters. That was my father-in-law. Um, and his daughters didn't want anything to do with him. And I totally get it. He abused them both, and the whole family basically hates his guts because of it, because he's a pedophile, right? But he was truly repentant, and if I had ever seen a real conversion to Christ, it was definitely in my father-in-law. But his behavior, his narcissistic behavior, his whining and all that stuff, that never changed. But he knew how to, he truly repented. I mean, he never did these things again. Um, but in my life, those who harm me, they never asked me for forgiveness. So a lot of people would say, you know what? I don't have to forgive. And there's no line in scripture that actually says I have to, especially in light of what we looked at last week in this book, which has to do with separation. And as it is now, both my perpetrators are dead, so I don't have them harming me in any way. Um, but if I had children, which I don't, but if I did, then I would have a responsibility to let them not be harmed the way I was because of my own history. So that would pass it down through the collective community, if you will. So just some interesting things to think about. And the thing with Michael Tait, honestly, I've read people talking about how he should go to jail and all this other stuff, but I think part of the issue is that we have statute of limitations, things were never reported, and things that were hidden. And I posted this comment on my personal Facebook yesterday. It had to do with this whole situation. If this thing with Michael Tait was the best kept secret in Nashville, then how come nobody in Nashville is speaking out? How come the Christian collective in Nashville, and I'm saying Tennessee as a whole, but in the Christian world, the Christian hub of Nashville, how come Nashville is silent on all of this? And I would argue this reason. Number one, money is king in Christian media. Salvation isn't. Money versus salvation. That's bottom line. You have a whole bunch of people who slap the name Christian on what they do, but they don't walk like Christ. And I made a whole other video about Michael Tait and others like Perry Stone being imposters, because the Bible talks about it. The Bible talks about how in the end there will be imposters among you, but I've never heard one sermon on imposters. All right, mister, we're going to put you down now because you're kicking me. Here, you get down, okay? All right. So that's an issue, right? When you have people who are masquerading as believers and you have a whole system that's toxic protecting them, to the naive Christian who actually thinks everybody with the label Christian is Christian, you know, and just I just have to say that it's interesting to me because my whole purpose in doing this YouTube channel is to help rescue people out of that stuff. It's actually to help bring clarity and true biblical freedom for people who've been harmed under the guise of Christianity. Um, and maybe I'll do another video on that another day. I don't want this to be too long. And so for today, I'm just going to end it here. But I want to thank you for listening to my little thing about this book, and also be warned about T-Mobile and others who want to upsell you and then like sneak in these hidden fees. Be wise. And yeah, let me know your thoughts. And thank you for watching. And if you want to subscribe, go for it. If you want to get in touch with me about coaching, the link is down there. Feel free to reach out. All right. I hope you have a good day. And as a good friend of mine always told me, I hope it's a better day for you.